The letter arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside, a newspaper clipping and 3 words printed on a printer. He came back home. I sat in my Boston apartment, holding that clipping with trembling hands, reading about Edward Harris, former history teacher at Miskatonic High School, who had retired after 15 years in Tokyo and decided to spend the rest of his life in his hometown in Massachusetts Harris. I hadn't spoken that name aloud in 15 years. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear the pulse in my ears. I pulled out my phone and called Jason, the only one from our old group I still kept in touch with. He answered after the first ring, and from his voice, I knew he had received a letter too. We didn't discuss details over the phone, just agreed to meet in Miskatonic in 2 days. I took time off, told colleagues I was visiting a sick aunt. No one in Boston knew much about my life before 20. I preferred it that way. Miskatonic greeted me with drizzling October rain. The town had barely changed. Same neat houses with white fences, same old supermarket on Main Street. But everything seemed smaller now, duller, as if the town had shrunk over the years. Or maybe I had grown and saw how small the world of my childhood really was. I couldn't help but remember that night. It happened 15 years ago. In the fall of 2010, my senior year, when I was 17, and thought I understood how the world worked, Harris sent Jason to the disciplinary committee after Jason accidentally knocked over a shelf with historical artifacts in Harris's classroom. Just clumsiness. Nothing more. But Harris insisted it was vandalism, and Jason faced expulsion. His parents begged the principal for leniency, and in the end, Jason got 2 weeks of detention after school. We all knew it was unfair. Harris had always been strict, a cold man with thin lips and icy eyes behind his glasses. But he treated Jason with particular cruelty, as if enjoying his power over a frightened teenager. Jason's older brother Mike suggested revenge. Mike was 3 years older, already working at a gas station outside town, and he hated Harris from his own school days, though he never explained why. The plan was simple. On the night before Halloween, break into Harris's garage and smash his precious 1967 Ford Mustang. Harris kept that car in the garage, only took it out on weekends, polished every detail to a shine. It was his pride, the only thing he loved. I remember how I hesitated. I wasn't a troublemaker, but Jason was my best friend since kindergarten, and Harris really had been unfair. Plus, it was our senior year, and we wanted to leave our mark, prove we weren't just obedient children. Amanda agreed to participate because she was in love with Mike, though he barely noticed her. Chris agreed because he always followed us wherever we went. A quiet, insecure kid who clung to our friendship like a lifeline. That's how we ended up on that cold October night near Harris's house, ready to make the biggest mistake of our lives.
The night was moonless, the air thick with the smell of rotting leaves and approaching winter. We hid around the corner from Harris's house. Me, Jason, Amanda, Chris, and Mike, while Mike's friend Tyler waited on his bike on the other side of the street. The plan was rehearsed. Tyler was supposed to knock on the door and run, something he'd been doing every evening for the past week, training Harris to expect this Halloween prank. Tonight, Harris was supposed to chase him in his car, and we would break into the garage. I watched as Tyler crept up to the door, knocked loudly, and ran to his bike. But instead of leaving immediately, he waited until Harris opened the door and shouted something insulting. Harris ran out of the house, got in his car, and sped after Tyler. We rushed to the garage. Mike broke the side window with a towel, muffling the sound, and we climbed inside. Mike turned on the light. The garage was empty. The Mustang wasn't there. and disappointment hit like physical pain. We had risked this, planned for weeks, and all for nothing. I suggested leaving, maybe breaking a window in the house on the way out, and Jason agreed, but Mike wasn't moving. He was staring at the corner of the garage where an old military chest with a padlock stood. He found bolt cutters on the tool rack and cut the lock. The sound of metal cutting metal seemed deafening in the silence. Mike opened the chest and froze. I stepped closer and looked inside. Letters, dozens of letters in white envelopes, neatly tied with ribbons, jewelry, earrings, rings, bracelets, each in a separate clear bag, and photographs. Photographs of young women in frames, and next to each, a small glass jar with a lock of hair. Chris started rummaging through the chest, stuffed some jewelry in his pocket. Amanda picked up one of the letters and began reading, her face going pale. Mike pulled out a photograph from the center of the chest. A girl with dark hair and a bright smile, and stared at it for a long time. Too long. Then his face changed. He dropped the photo back as if it had burned his hands and ordered Chris to return the jewelry. Said we needed to leave immediately. Jason started arguing. We hadn't done anything yet. We didn't come here for this. But Mike grabbed his shoulder so hard that Jason winced in pain. We climbed out through the window and ran to our bikes. I looked back once. Harris's house stood dark and quiet like a grave. We raced through empty streets until Mike finally stopped near the closed supermarket. All of us gasping, legs trembling from adrenaline and fear. I asked what had frightened him so much. Mike explained that he recognized the girl in the photograph, Lisa Campbell. She had disappeared without a trace 3 years ago, when we were still in middle school. A local college student who vanished after a party. They searched for her for months, her photos all over town. The body was never found.
Mike was absolutely certain, and the lock of hair and jewelry belonged to her. I couldn't believe it. Suggested it was just a similar girl, maybe a relative. But Mike looked at me with such an expression that I fell silent. He was neither an idiot nor a coward. If he said it was Lisa Campbell, then it was her. Mike went to the phone booth and called the police. Anonymously reported that in the garage of Edward Harris on Elm Street, there were items that might be connected to Lisa Campbell's disappearance. Didn't say how he knew, just gave the address and hung up. We expected police cars to arrive at Harris's house, maybe even a helicopter and TV crews. We imagined Harris being let out in handcuffs, Lisa's body being found, her family finally getting answers. But nothing like that happened. One police officer arrived half an hour later, knocked on Harris's door, talked to him for a few minutes, looked in the garage, and left. The whole thing took less than 15 minutes. We understood our mistake too late. Our break-in had warned Harris, and by the time the officer checked the garage, the chest had already been moved or destroyed. An anonymous call on the night before Halloween looked like a stupid prank. The following weeks I lived in constant fear, afraid that Harris would figure out who broke into his garage, afraid to look him in the eyes during class. At night I woke up in cold sweat, dreaming of the photographs in the chest, the glass jars with hair. Mike said we needed to be patient, that investigations take time, that Harris would eventually be arrested. But it didn't happen. Right after Christmas break, the principal announced at a school assembly that Mr. Harris was leaving the school. He had received a prestigious offer to teach at an international school in Tokyo. The principal spoke of it as a great achievement, about how Harris would represent American education abroad. Only the 5 of us knew the real reason for his departure. Harris left within a week. I saw the truck taking away his belongings, saw him take one last look at the house before getting into a taxi. His face was calm, almost content. He had escaped. and we had helped him do it. For 15 years, I tried to forget that night, buried the memories so deep they would never surface. I left Miskatonic right after graduation, went to university in Boston, built a new life. Financial analyst, good salary, apartment in a decent neighborhood. I almost convinced myself that the past stayed in the past. And then the letter came. We met at the old diner. Me, Jason, and Amanda. Chris couldn't come. His PTSD from service in Afghanistan had flared up, and he was afraid to leave his apartment. Jason had barely changed. Same red hair, now with gray, and freckles. He'd stayed in Miskatonic, working at an auto shop and raising 2 sons. Amanda had changed more. Short hair, hard expression, nervous movements. She worked as an editor at a New York publishing house, twice divorced. When she pulled out a cigarette with trembling hands, I noticed her nails were bitten to the blood. We showed each other the letters. Identical, same clipping, same 3 words Jason told us he learned about Harris's return a week ago. Harris had bought his old house on Elm Street. That same house. Jason had seen the truck bringing furniture, seen Harris on the porch. Harris had waved at him like an old acquaintance.
Amanda suggested going to the police, telling them everything we knew. But what did we know? We saw a chest 15 years ago. We had no proof. Just our words against those of a respected retiree who had worked at a prestigious school for 15 years. Besides, we had committed a crime ourselves. Broke into his house, smashed a window. Our anonymous call could be seen as a false accusation. I asked about Mike. Jason lowered his eyes. Mike had become an alcoholic after college, couldn't hold down any job. Everyone thought he was just a loser, a weakling who couldn't handle adult life. But we knew the truth. Guilt was eating him alive. He blamed himself for letting Harris get away, for the possibility that there might be other victims somewhere. 3 years ago, Mike died of cirrhosis. He was 32. We sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, I said what we were all thinking. Someone had sent us these letters. Someone knew our secret. And that someone wanted us to do something. We decided to watch Harris. Jason would observe his daily routine. Amanda would use her publishing connections to find information about other missing girls and places where Harris had lived. And I took on the hardest task, trying to meet Harris in person. The next evening, I rang his doorbell. Harris opened almost immediately as if waiting. He had barely changed. Same cold eyes behind his glasses, same thin lips. He looked at me for a long time, studying me, and I was sure he recognized me. But he didn't let on. Just asked how he could help. He introduced myself as a journalist writing an article about outstanding educators, and asked for an interview. Harris was silent for so long, I was ready to turn and leave. Then he nodded and invited me inside. The house was neat and impersonal. No personal photographs, no souvenirs from Japan, nothing that could tell about his life. The walls were bare, the furniture functional and cheap, as if no one lived here, just temporarily stayed. We sat in the living room. I asked standard questions about his career, took notes in a notebook while carefully looking around, and then I noticed a door at the end of the hallway. A heavy door with a new lock, not an ordinary door lock, but a padlock, like on warehouses. In Miskatonic, few houses had basements due to high groundwater levels. But Harris's house stood on a small hill. I asked if I could use the bathroom. Harris showed the way. And when he returned to the living room, I noticed a set of keys on a hook in the hallway. One of them clearly fit the padlock. I finished the interview as quickly as possible. Harris walked me to the door, and on the threshold, he placed his hand on my shoulder. Heavily, too heavily. He said he was glad to see how well I had done in life, that he always remembered his students. All his students. His fingers squeezed harder, almost painfully. Then he released me and closed the door. I walked to my car, feeling his gaze on my back. When I turned around, he stood at the window, a motionless silhouette behind the glass. He knew. He had always known. That evening we gathered in my motel room. Amanda brought printouts of articles from Japanese newspapers, translated by an online translator. During the 15 years Harris taught in Tokyo, 5 girls had disappeared. All students at the school where he worked, all between 17 and 20 years old, none were found.
Jason reported that Harris left his house every evening at 8 for exactly 1 hour, walked in the park, then returned. Like clockwork. We knew what we had to do. Knew it was madness, that we could go to prison. But we also knew this was our only chance to fix the mistake from 15 years ago. The next evening, we put our plan into action. As soon as Harris left for his walk, we drove to his house. Chris came from Providence. He had learned to pick locks in the Army. His hands trembled as he worked on the back door. But in 2 minutes, we were inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear my breathing, my heartbeat, the creak of floorboards under my feet. I took the key ring from the hook and approached the basement door. The lock opened with a loud click that echoed in the silence. We descended the wooden stairs, Chris turning on his phone flashlight. The basement was clean and well lit. Concrete walls, a bare bulb on the ceiling, and in the center, an old military chest. That same chest. It wasn't locked. I opened the lid, and the smell hit me in the face. Mustiness, mold, and something else. Something sweet and nauseating. Inside were envelopes with letters neatly tied with ribbons, jewelry in bags, photographs in frames, glass jars with locks of hair in different shades, from platinum blonde to blue-black. I started counting the photographs. 10, 15, 20. Amanda gasped. She was holding one of the photographs, a girl with dark hair and a bright smile, Lisa Campbell. Jason found photographs of girls from Tokyo, those same 5 the newspapers wrote about. But there were others. Girls we didn't recognize. How many were there? How many lives had this man ended? My hands moved through the chest. Each photograph a life. Each jar a trophy. Each letter a final message never sent. I found a small notebook at the bottom and opened it. Dates, names, locations, all written in Harris's neat handwriting. A catalog of Death 23 names. 23 women who had trusted him, smiled at him, never suspected. I was so absorbed in the contents that I didn't hear the creak of floorboards upstairs, didn't hear the front door open. Only when the basement door creaked did I realize Harris had returned. He stood at the top of the stairs, looking at us. In his hand was a gun. Time stopped. I stared at the black barrel pointed directly at me. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Harris began descending, slowly, methodically, like a teacher walking to the blackboard. His face was calm, almost content. He said he had always known it was us that night, that he had watched us all these years, knew where we lived, what we did, who we met, that he had sent the letters himself. He wanted us to come back, wanted to finish what he started many years ago. His collection was incomplete without us. Each step brought him closer. The gun never wavered. I looked around frantically. The stairs behind Harris, no other exit. We were trapped. Harris reached the bottom step and smiled with thin lips, without warmth, without emotion. He said we were too late anyway, that some of them had long since become part of this house, that we were standing on them right now. I looked down. The basement's concrete floor was too new, too smooth, as if it had been recently poured. Harris raised the gun and aimed at my chest. Time slowed and I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Chris moved first. He lunged at Harris with a scream more like a wounded animal's roar than a human sound. A shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Chris fell on the stairs, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading across his shirt. Jason and I rushed forward. I don't remember the details. Just chaos, screams, the smell of gunpowder. Harris was stronger than he looked, fought like a man with nothing to lose. The gun went off again. The bullet hitting the concrete wall, ricocheting with a whine. Amanda screamed and threw herself at Harris's legs. He stumbled and the gun flew from his hands, skittering across the floor into a corner. Amanda scrambled after it, her hands shaking so badly she almost couldn't pick it up. But she did. She pointed it at Harris with both hands, finger on the trigger. For a moment I thought she would shoot. Saw it in her eyes, the rage, the pain, 15 years of guilt and fear. But she didn't. Just held the gun steady while Jason and I tied Harris with rope we found in the basement. I pressed my jacket to Chris's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The fabric turning red almost immediately, Jason called the police, his voice shaking as he gave the address. Harris lay on the floor, bound, but his face remained calm. He looked at me and smiled, with thin lips, without warmth, without emotion. He said we were too late anyway, that some of them had long since become part of this house, that we were standing on them right now. The police arrived in 10 minutes. The ambulance took Chris. The bullet went through. He would survive. We were detained for illegal entry, but given the circumstances, charges were dropped. Forensics opened the basement floor and found the remains of 6 women buried under the concrete. Lisa Campbell was among them. The story made national news. Harris confessed to murdering 23 women over 30 years. 23 lives ended by a man who taught children history, who smiled at parents at meetings, who seemed like an exemplary educator. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He was 68 years old and would spend the rest of his days in prison. But it brought no relief. They say time heals all wounds. A year has passed since Harris's arrest, and I'm still waiting for that healing to begin. I still live in Boston, still work as a financial analyst, but something has changed. I can't sleep with the lights off. Can't go down into basements. Every time I see an old chest or military box, a wave of nausea washes over me. Sometimes I think about Mike, about how guilt destroyed his life, about how he didn't live to see justice served. If we had gone to the police right after that night, if we had insisted, maybe 5 girls in Tokyo would be alive, maybe Mike would be alive. But the past can't be changed. Every night I see the chest, photographs in frames, glass jars with hair, letters tied with ribbons. I see the faces of girls who are no more. 23 faces that haunt me in my sleep. And I see Harris standing at the top of the stairs with a gun in his hand, his calm face, his thin smile. He knew we would come. He was waiting for us. Miskatonic will forever remain part of me. A town with white fences and quiet streets, where secrets are buried under neat lawns, where teachers murder their students, and children stay silent out of fear. I will never return there, but Miskatonic lives in my nightmares, in every shadow, in every creak of floorboards, in every locked basement some towns let you go. Miskatonic holds tight, forever, with its dead hands pulling you back into the darkness.